So without further ado, we will have our first guest on, who is somebody that has spoken at many a SaaStock conference in person, but this is the first SaaStock online event. And so I'd like to welcome Kieren Flanagan, who's VP of Marketing at HubSpot. Welcome, Kieran.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alex. Excited to do this.
Excellent. No, great to have you on here. And as I say, the first online SaaStock event, and first time on Hopin, who are a HubSpot customer. You happen to mention, so it's good to know. What are you going to be speaking about today, Kieran?
Yeah, so I'm going to be speaking on something that is actually relatively new in terms of what I have been thinking about, and me and some of the team have been working on, which is thinking about distribution TAMs. And so for startups, it's really interesting that we spend all of our time thinking about how to grow and tactically how do you grow, and not that much time thinking about how much growth are actually available in these channels. And we've been trying to figure out how to work that out. I don't think we've perfected it, but I thought it would be interesting to share some of the thoughts we have and see what people think about them.
Well, sounds exciting. As exciting as the fact that the pubs are now open in Ireland.
Yeah. My friend was one of the first people in Ireland to book a seat in the pub as soon as they opened.
Very cool. We have a colleague that has done the same, but not in Ireland. But without further ado, Kieran, I'm going to leave the stage. It's going to be yours for 10 minutes. I'll be back in 10 minutes' time, and I'm sure we've got a lot to cover in that time. So over to you.
Cool. All right. Let me share my screen. Hopefully this all will work out. So hopefully people can see the screen and still kind of see me. So yeah, what I wanted to talk about actually was kind of distribution TAMs. And so the thing I'm going to start off with is Playbooks. And so when you are a startup, let me see if I can. All right. I think this is okay. You can still see it. So when you are a startup and a growing company, I don't think there's any real debate that there's kind of two quadrants you move from. So you kind of start off in this quadrant where you have these unscalable playbooks on the left, lower left. And then they are kind of the things that work to get you your initial traction. So you think about some of the stories that are pretty well known out there, Pinterest doing these kind of internal or these meetups for people who are interior designers. And you think about Pinterest as huge social network and growing really, really fast and growing from Google for predominantly today. And where they started was actually in-person events. And that kind of seems bizarre for a company like Pinterest. Etsy are another example of a company like that. Today, just this really amazing marketplace. When they started, they actually grew from events for crafts and arts people who are interested in the platform. Pretty unscalable way for a company like Etsy to grow, but a great way to get initial traction. And then when you move from that startup and growing company and into the scale up quadrant, you basically have to find these kind of scalable channels. How do I continue to grow? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about a little bit today. And so for most B2B companies, there's kind of these four quadrants in terms of how you can actually grow. And I can see that they're not actually shown on my screen. So let me see if I stop sharing and share again. Yeah. Okay, it's moved along now. So there's these kind of four quadrants in terms of how you can actually grow. So most B2B companies grow in the exact same way. And this is kind of how I think about it, where you have the maintain, incremental, and exponential buckets, and then you have an at-risk bucket. So when you're a B2B company and you move from a startup to a scale-up, what tends to happen is you found a couple of things that work really, really well. And then you just incrementally grow on those things. And so you're in incremental bucket. And then there's a ton of things in that maintain bucket. That maintain bucket are things that you need to continue to keep your investment flat, to keep the growth flat, because you need that. Consider things like a B2B company who has an event strategy can only do so many events in so many cities, and then they have to maintain that level of investment. So you have your maintain bucket, your incremental bucket. The exponential growth bucket is really a B2C thing. B2C companies do or die by winning in distribution. And so you think about Uber Eats trying to buy Grubhub, or Facebook trying to buy Instagram. B2C companies need to own a huge share of the market to be profitable. At risk is, what are the things that are going to stop working for me in the next 12 to 18 months? We try to have always something in our at-risk bucket, so we know to account for that in kind of our growth plans. And so the thing that we've kind of been thinking about and is, let me just do this. So this presentation is not working. I'm going to just reshare my screen if that is okay. And I'm going to not present. So basically, distributions of TAMs are really good. I know it's hard to see this chart, but when I present, it breaks it. So this is a good example from HubSpot, right? This is from SimilarWeb. This is public data. If you go look at our traffic growth in 2017, we're really, really flat, right? You can see us actually we're flat and declining. And you could say, okay, well, now we have reached the bucket of maintain. We should just maintain investment there. Because most B2B companies run out of path at some point because their markets are quite small compared to B2C. The interesting thing is, if you know your distribution TAM, you know what decision you should make. You can actually continue to invest if there's more growth available to you. So a good example for us is we did this exercise. We were like, okay, should we just maintain the traffic that we have? We've got a lot of traffic for a B2B company. I think if you see the chart, it's about 3 million monthly visits to our blogs. But we said, no, let's do a distribution TAM exercise and figure out what is our growth potential in Google? What is our growth potential in Facebook? What is our growth potential in all of these other places? And we could see by doing that exercise, we had a ton of growth left in Google, and we should continue to invest in that growth. And that is exactly what we did. So you see, if I pull that forward, we went from that 5.8 million, actually it was not 3 million, it was 5.8 million monthly visits, all the way up to 12 something million monthly visits. And we could only make that decision because we understood what our distribution TAM opportunity was. And so when you're in that incremental bucket, the fascinating thing for me is the decisions you have to make are not that vast, right? If I'm incrementally growing something, I know what channels I'm going to grow from. So I don't have to try to figure out what channels are going to work for me because I'm in the incremental bucket. A couple of things have worked for me, and I'm just going to incrementally grow those things. The thing you're usually trying to figure out, and the thing we spend all of our time thinking about is, what are the tactics and tips for me to incrementally grow in those buckets? The thing we never really do is actually think about how much growth is actually available for us. How should I think about this in terms of the growth for the next 12 to 18 to 24 months? And if we keep on going with the search example, most search things, most of your SEO strategy is in this topic cluster model. So the way that we think about search is we divide everything into the topics, and then we cluster all of the content available under those topics, and we divide that thing out. So we think how many topics are relevant to our personas, and then we create these little clusters. What's fascinating about that, even if you just are doing search, you can create a TAM per topic. So let's say the topic is content marketing. Content marketing is then broken down into informational search, which means the person is both unaware of the problem and unaware of the solution to that problem. So there's usually a lot more traffic, but it converts at far lower rates. And then they are made up of transactional searches when that is when someone is aware of the problem they have and they are actually searching for a solution for it. So they convert better, but generally has less traffic. So each topic has a TAM, and that TAM is broken out into informational and transactional content, which I think is kind of fascinating. Even if I'm just a startup and I'm like, okay, well, how many topics are relevant to my persona? What is the total addressable market of each of those topics? And how is it broken down into informational and transactional? And for most startups, what you should do is you should do that for topics, and then you should build into the transactional portion of the topic first, because that is going to result in higher conversions, and it generally sometimes has less competition. That's one of the questions I always get asked. But what's really fascinating to me about this is you can start to expand this for organic search in its totality, right? We've done this. What are all of the topics we could create content from? What are all of the clustered content we could attach to those topics? Of all of those keywords related to those topics, what is the monthly search volume available for them? Then we can work out actually how much potential traffic can we get from that. And so the way you do that is you say, okay, if I think I'm going to be in the lower range in terms of being able to acquire that traffic to my site, I'm going to say my average position in Google is going to be between 8 and 10. In the medium range, 5 to 8, and then in the upper range, 5 to 1 or 4 to 1. And the cool thing is, when you really get into this, there's some other data points you can use to make this more accurate. So the reason you rank in Google is because of your domain authority. And so when I think about the lower, medium, and upper ranges in terms of the traffic I can get from all of these topics, dependent upon my domain authority, I can actually use the lower range, the medium range, or the upper range, right? If I have a low domain authority, I should use the lower range. If it gets better, I should use the medium range. If it gets even better, and in the kind of top couple of percent in my industry, I should use the upper range. And in that way, then I have a more accurate representation of just how much traffic can I get over time. Then you have trends. You can look at Google Trends for the core keywords in a topic and see, is it trending up or down? Is it stable? That allows you to start to think, okay, over time, this topic is actually going to grow. So the amount of traffic I can get from it over time is actually going to grow. Then the other thing you can use is saturation. People don't do this. So I look at the total amount of traffic I can get from all of these different keywords attached to these topics, and then I dedupe it against the content that is already ranking for those keywords. So like, what traffic am I already getting? In that way, I can both see how saturated I am and how much available traffic there is left for me to go after. And then I can look at expected conversion rate. If there's content I produced on that topic, how does it convert? Or if there are topics similar to that topic, I use that as a benchmark. So just by really thinking about, how do I know how much effort I should expend in this channel, you can start to get some real data. And that's one example of organic search. And we've kind of built out a more sophisticated version of this. The other real simplistic way to do this, or channel you can do this in, is paid, right? This is a really simplistic way that you can think about your paid, which is when you increase your paid spend on advertising channels, at a certain point, your cost to acquire users or leads or whatever it may be will continue to go up to a point where you're not profitable. So we think about our return on ad spend. We try to always make sure when we put in $1 to our paid advertising, we get $3 back. And so how much can I spend until I do not get that $3 back? And you can actually plot this if you have some existing data. The other way you can do this is you can run what are called burst tests. Burst test means you saturate the channel for 2 weeks to get enough data to be able to work out how much you can physically spend in that channel before you dip below your threshold. Now I know how much traffic can I get in total for organic. How much can I spend in paid total in terms of the amount of a total addressable market that I can acquire. So I now know how much I should think about resourcing these things over time. The other one I'll just leave with, because I know I'm out of time, is virality. Virality is a very interesting one because you can get your viral coefficient. You know, how if I acquire a user, that user then leads to me acquiring another 0.2 user, and I can start to plot out the viral growth I can get from these other channels. And so the thought I would just leave you with is, this may not be totally applicable to you, or you may not be able to replicate this in the same way that I've talked about it, but I would say think about it, right? Do not just spend all of your time thinking about, how do I incrementally grow in this channel? Do spend some time thinking about, oh, how much available growth is in this channel? Maybe I can just grow from this single channel over the next 24 to 36 months. And that's where I should spend all of my resources and time.
There we go, Kieran. Only a little bit over, but that's fine. And you cram so much into those 10 minutes, and always a very kind of data-driven conversation there and talk. So I really appreciate that. We ran a poll during that talk, and you can see the audience. So we asked who's good at distribution TAM. Majority said no, 80%. Do you think, and from what you've seen, obviously HubSpot are how many thousands of employees now? When we look at it from the startup, 10, 20, less than 50 type sort of companies, that distribution TAMs are either common or they're certainly something that people should be just putting into place, irrespective of the size.
Yeah, it's really not that hard to get started with this. Even if you take away, okay, I need to grow through creating content on my blog, you can basically look to see how much available traffic there is relevant to you. So you just say, okay, well, the 3 topics relevant to my persona are paid advertising, content marketing, and email marketing. And I can look at all of the keywords for those different topics. I can aggregate it all up. I can hypothesize about how much of that I can get, and I can hypothesize about how much conversions I can get from that. And then I actually have a real total addressable market to work towards. And it always amazes me, like we have total addressable markets for businesses and we pitch to investors. We don't think about actually what are the total addressable markets of each of my channels, because that actually tells me how I should invest in resources, how I should think about the growth of my distribution engine over the next 12 to 24 months.
Great advice. Kieran, where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter with the weirdest handle @SearchBrat and LinkedIn, and then you can check out HubSpot if you so wish to do.
Awesome. Well, obviously we're recording, all talks, and these will be published on YouTube. So if you want to watch this again, go through in detail, these will be up very soon. And so, Kieran, thank you very much. And welcome. I think he was here just a second ago.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Welcome
Alex.
back. Thanks, Kieran.